Okay guys, so we're going to have a look at the human defense system today. So I'm going to do this through using your book. I'm also going to be flicking through the slides at some points as well, and any sort of extra notes or anything to be taken, I am going to use OneNote, and I will share this OneNote with you guys if we do take any notes or if I am explaining diagrams. Okay, so that's going to be the format of the class over the next while for most of the time. Okay, so just back to the book here for a second. So we have our introduction to the human defense system, and as you can see on the left hand side, there are three very important definitions. Okay, so these here are really important, so you have to take those into your copy. Okay, now so if you just go through this, so in the human body, it defends itself against bacteria, fungi and viruses that cause disease. Okay, so very applicable to what is currently happening with the whole COVID-19 situation. The human defense system, it allows the body to resist infection, and it has two parts: the general defense system and also the specific defense system. So the general defense system is non-specific, okay? And this means that it acts against all pathogens, and there are two parts to the general defense system. So number one, this is the skin, mucous membranes and other secretions of the skin, such as oil and sebum. And these features attempt to prevent the entry of the pathogens. So that's like the physical barriers that exist in order to stop things from getting in. And the second part consists of white blood cells and chemicals that destroy any pathogens that penetrate the body. So the specific defense system, also called the immune system, and it attacks particular or specific pathogens, either by producing antibodies against them or by killing infected cells. So the specific defense system is very targeted in what it is looking for. So it only attacks particular or specific pathogens, usually by producing antibodies or by killing the infected cells. And when we come along to it, we'll see that there's different types of cells that enable this function to occur. So we're going to have a look now at the general defense system first of all, okay, and then we will move along to the specific defense system. So our general defense system, the first line of general defense, consists of the skin, your mucous membranes, that line the respiratory, digestive, urinary and reproductive tracts, and secretions produced by the skin and mucous membranes. So examples of how the first line of the general defense system operates includes the following. Okay, so your skin, and that provides a structural barrier to infection. Okay, so it's very much a physical barrier that exists that prevents pathogens from entering the body. Clotting now is the next one. So if the skin is broken, blood clotting prevents the entry of further pathogens as well as preventing blood loss. Okay, so if the skin is broken, and that includes things like, let's say if you get a cut and your body has the ability to form a dried membrane over that, and that will prevent any sort of pathogens from entering the body. That means that if you have a cut and you leave it uncovered and it has not yet formed a protective membrane, then you may be susceptible to getting another type of infection. Again, applicable to the current situation that we find ourselves in with COVID-19. If you have a cut, it is important that if a membrane has not formed over it, to keep it covered in order to stop any entry into our body, because the main parts of our body that do get infected by various viruses and bacteria are through the openings like our mouth and our nose. But likewise, if we do have a cut in our skin, then that does provide an entry pathway for bacteria and viruses to enter. Lysozymes are the next thing, and those are enzymes found in sweat, tears and saliva, and it attacks and dissolves the cell walls of many bacteria. Your sebaceous glands, they produce sebum or oil in the skin, and that contains chemicals that kills bacteria. Okay, so your sebum is important. Mucus, so many body systems are lined with sticky mucus. Pathogens are trapped by this mucus and prevented from entering the body. Examples of that are the lining of your nose produce mucus, and the back of your throat that produces mucus too. Cilia, so we've heard of these before. Your cilia exist in tiny hairs in the respiratory tract. They also, if you remember back to the human reproduction, they exist in the fallopian tube, where they aid in actually wafting the egg along the fallopian tube in order to move it into a position where fertilization can occur. So in this case here, they actually help to, if some sort of pathogen enters the body, these cilia act as a method of general defense in order to push it back out of the body and back out into the open environment. So they do this by beating and creating a current which moves mucus back up the respiratory system so that it can be swallowed into the stomach. Okay, so when it gets to the stomach, then the highly acidic chemical of hydrochloric acid there actually kills off the bacteria. Okay, and then acid, that's what I just said there. So hydrochloric acid in the stomach kills many pathogens. So beneficial bacteria that exist in places like the vagina produce lactic acid, and this prevents the growth of pathogens as well. Okay, so those are all your primary lines of defense that exist in the body in order to prevent us from actually being infected. Okay, so we have our skin, we have our lysozymes, sebaceous glands, mucus, cilia, and also our acid and our beneficial bacteria as well. So if you just come back here to the slides for a second. Okay, so you have some general definitions here. Those things are underlined, they're important for you to take. Now here is an oversight of all of the defense systems that are present in the human body. It's just a diagrammatic version of it. Okay, here is the notes on your general defense system, your barriers to entry. So we have gone through these: the skin, the respiratory system, the oil that's present in the skin. I haven't got it highlighted there. The enzyme lysosome or lysozyme, as it says back in the book, helps to kill bacteria by bursting their cell walls or cell membranes. The walls of the vagina form lactic acid, which inhibits the growth of pathogens, and blood clots then are the next thing. Okay, so those are your barriers to entry. Okay, so if we just have a look back here at our book, we'll just do another little bit on our second line of defense then. So this is all down to the actual white blood cells themselves that will help to prevent your body from being infected. So there's a list here. So your phagocytic white blood cells are the things we're going to be mainly focusing on. Okay, so your second line of general defense consists of the destruction by white blood cells of pathogens that have entered the body, the production of proteins that kill or prevent pathogens from reproducing, and the inflammatory response. Okay, so there's kind of three ways there. So it's the destruction by white blood cells of pathogens, the production of proteins that kill or prevent pathogens from reproducing, and also the inflammatory response that comes with this. The inflammatory response is often represented as a fever in the human body. And the ways by which these mechanisms work are outlined below. So first of all, we have our phagocytic white blood cells. So when cells are damaged by invading microorganisms, they release a large number of chemicals. And these chemicals attract white blood cells from the bloodstream. And the white blood cells engulf or surround and destroy any bacteria, viruses, or other microorganisms that they may meet. And these types of white blood cells are called phagocytes. So our phagocytes here, they actually engulf and destroy any bacteria. So they actually kind of eat it up essentially, or viruses or other microorganisms as well. Okay, so they actually surround it, a bit like an amoeba that uses osmosis and diffusion in order to take things into their cell, and their pseudopods that form around these pieces of matter that they want to take into their cell. Our phagocytes are very, very, very similar to that, in that they will engulf or surround a piece of bacteria or virus that is a danger or is a pathogen to our human body, and they will actually ingest it, and the structures that are present inside will help to kill it and stop our body being infected by any more of the same type of bacteria or virus. So some phagocytes are very large and are called macrophages. Okay, so bigger phagocytes are called macrophages. So some macrophages move around the body in fluids and act as scavengers for pathogens, and other macrophages remain fixed in places such as the spleen, the lymph nodes, and other lymphatic tissues such as the tonsils, adenoids, and appendix. And these macrophages filter out and destroy any pathogens that are present in lymph. Okay, so some are fixed in places and some move around the body. Okay. Your defense proteins then. So complement, which is in order to, they have to work in tandem with each other or side by side. So complement is a set of about 20 proteins found in the blood plasma. So these guys here are found in blood plasma. And the proteins in complement are activated by infection. So once activated, these proteins destroy viruses and other pathogens too. So interferons are another set of defense proteins, and they prevent viral multiplication and help to limit the spread of virus infections such as colds and influenza. Okay, so complements are the first set. Okay, they're found mainly in blood plasma. They're activated by infection, and once activated, they destroy viruses and other pathogens. Your second type are interferons, and they prevent viral multiplication and help to limit the spread of virus infections such as cold and influenza. Okay, and then finally, your inflammation. And as I was saying, this is represented by things like a fever. So when cells are infected, they release a chemical that results in blood capillaries opening wider and becoming more porous. So that means that they dilate. Okay, so blood capillaries open and they become wider or more porous. And this causes localized swelling, redness, heat, and pain. And in addition, it brings more white blood cells to the area to fight the infection. So sometimes inflammation occurs over the whole body, and in this case, it causes increased body temperature called fever. And the higher the temperature, the more it interferes with the ability of some bacteria and viruses to reproduce. Okay, so high temperature can actually stop bacteria and viruses reproducing, and this is because their optimum temperature is below what our fever temperature would be. Okay, so again, best thing, come back to the whole COVID-19 that's currently happening. The human body is being infected by a virus. The white blood cells, such as our phagocytes and macrophages, they are working very, very hard in order to get rid of the virus from the people who have it. In addition, their defense proteins, such as interferons, are helping to prevent viral multiplication. And then in terms of inflammation, people who are suffering from COVID-19 are experiencing a fever or fever type symptoms. And this is a completely natural inflammatory response that is preventing the virus from actually overcoming the body. So that is the body's natural defense mechanism in order to fight off the virus. So people will have a fever, and it is advised not to take any sort of immunosuppressant tablets such as non-steroidal inflammatories or anti-inflammatories like Nurofen, because that actually suppresses the body's natural fever, and therefore by keeping the temperature down, the virus is actually replicating better within the body. So that's why there's some various types of advice going around at the minute. But that's only for people who are confirmed positive cases of COVID-19, okay? So you can see here how the body has its own mechanism of defense, but sometimes it's just not strong enough. And that depends on people's own immunities and what they have been susceptible to before in the past, okay? So in terms of our general defense system, if we just revise over that now for a second, we have our first line of general defense, okay? And there's a couple of different things associated with that, like your skin, lysozymes, sebaceous glands, mucus, cilia, acid, and beneficial bacteria. And then your second line of general defense includes your white blood cell reaction. So things like your phagocytes, your macrophages, your defense proteins, and then finally your inflammation is considered your second line of general defense. Okay? So if we just come back here now for a second, this is all summed up here. You have your inflammatory reaction, your phagocyte white blood cells, and your complement proteins. So those things are underlined. Okay? Now, I'm not going to move on to the specific defense system just yet. We will move on to that in our next lesson. So if you could please just get down with get yourselves very familiar with the general defense system, know your first line of general defense or your primary defense system, know your second line of general defense and what comes with it, and then we'll move on to the specific defense system in our next lesson. Okay, I will post the slides on Google Classroom, and any other relevant kind of videos or notes I will also post up there too. Okay, any questions, please revert to the Google Doc that I have set up for this chapter, and type in your question there, so that if anyone has the same question, then everybody can see the answer up there. Okay.